Now for our politics panel. Susan Page is USA Today's Washington bureau chief. Clarence Page is a columnist with the Chicago Tribune. Amy Davidson is a staff writer and contributor for The New Yorker. And Ron Fournier is a senior political columnist for the National Journal and the author of a new book, Love That Boy. Susan Page, start with you. Who has the better argument between Donald Trump and Reince Priebus about the Republican nominating process?
Well, Priebus is technically correct. You know, the rules have been in place for a long time, so read the rules and know what they're going. But, you know, Donald Trump has a very powerful political message to make here, which is if he's gotten the most votes, if he's gotten the most delegates, why in the world would you deny him the nomination? And this is the dilemma, I think, for the Republicans. They have two bad choices. They can nominate Trump and lose a lot of traditional Republicans who find him unacceptable. They can not nominate Trump and they'll lose his supporters. I don't think they have a really good option here.
Yeah, Amy Davidson, when Reince Priebus explains the rules, as Susan says, he's walking through well-established party rules. But sometimes, you know, when you look at things in the light of a new day, it seems, Reince Priebus said he can rest in the truth. I don't know if he's that restful right now.
He didn't look restful. I think one thing that Trump has going for him in this argument is that it fits so well with the general case he's been making, that things are rigged, that it's corrupt. He's basically worked on the assumption that you can't tell the American people enough that the political system is corrupt. That he explains his contributions to Democrats by saying, I was a builder in New York, I had to buy them off. And it works for him because it doesn't contradict anything that his supporters like about him.
Clarence, one thing Donald Trump has been doing in addition to making this claim about the Republican Party is he's kind of retooled a little bit his campaign. I don't know. What do you make of it? Do you think that's...
Well, he's found the need to retool because he did not have much of a ground game, for example. Ted Cruz has found a distinct advantage in a number of states by having people there to roust up votes for him. And delegates for him, even though, as we know by now, the delegates and the votes are not necessarily connected, or at least not in the way most people might think. And that's why Reince Priebus is running into this problem now, and why Trump has something of an argument, much like in 2000 during the Florida debacle, or in 1968 when Hubert Humphrey got the nomination without having the votes in the primaries. That's the sort of thing that hits the voters by surprise. And they say, oh, it is rigged. It must be rigged. I don't understand it. It must be rigged. And so this gives Trump some traction with that argument.
Ron, what do you make of... You've covered so many presidents. As a candidate, what does this tell us, Donald Trump's approach to this other complicated business? What does it tell us about him as a potential president? What are we learning about his skills?
That he'll do anything he can and say anything he can to get what he wants. He's a very bottom line Machiavellian guy. But he's also tapped into something that's real out there. People understand that politics really needs to be reformed. And let's talk about the arc of reform here on this specific instance. Up until the 1970s, everything was picked. All nominees were picked by a bunch of white men in smoke-filled rooms. Since the 70s, as historian Matthew Dallek wrote about today in the Washington Post, we've had a sensible blend of voters participating and making their voices known, and mostly men in smoke-filled rooms making a decision, at least the establishment. I think going forward, what Trump is tapping into, what Bernie Sanders is tapping into, is the public believes in evolution, at least in political evolution. And going forward, we need to have a more democratic, more accessible, more transparent process for nominating candidates, or these parties are no longer going to be relevant. So if you want to be a relevant party, a millennial party, you need to find a different way to nominate people who are going to be leading your party.
So the question is, can that be done, Susan, while you're also actually trying to put a convention together? I mean, that seems like an awfully...
And you know, one thing that Reince Priebus said that I think is actually not entirely accurate, or a little misleading, is that the rules are up to the convention. Well, that's true in the end, but the RNC Rules Committee is meeting this week in Hollywood, Florida, and they could send to the Convention Rules Committee, which is a separate body, different rules. And in fact, I think we may see a really fierce battle that begins this week in Florida over, do we use the House of Representatives rules, or do we use Robert's Rules of Orders? How easy would it be to open the nomination to people who did not compete in the primaries? This fight is going to start really soon.
And we're going to get, go ahead, Amy.
And the key thing on that is that the delegates, even if they're pledged to Trump in theory, are not pledged to him on rules questions, only on the nomination question. So a Trump delegate can, even before the balloting starts, vote against Trump's interests.
And you know who's focused on who's getting on that rules committee is the Cruz campaign. Just as they've been focused on delegate selection process in a way that the Trump campaign is not, they are focused on who's going to be sitting on that important rules committee that on the 18th decides what rules that convention will abide by.
I know, for a senator whose colleagues say he doesn't know about how to play strategy, he's played the backroom part of this game very well.
How about this for a little irony? Right now, this weekend in Miami-Dade County, they're not using a smoke-filled room, but they're picking delegates in a cigar warehouse.
Little throwback. Clarence, Susan mentioned the idea of maybe another person coming in on the stage based on the way the rules may be written. Paul Ryan, the House Speaker, tried to take himself off the stage this week. What did you make of that?
It reminds me of that song, I Won't Dance, Don't Ask Me. You know? And naturally, after he sounds very much like he did when a lot of folks wanted him to run for Speaker of the House and said he wasn't going to do it. And of course, we know he's now Speaker of the House. I think it's important for Ryan personally to stay try to be an honest broker. He is Speaker of the House, and he may be called upon to at least help resolve the disputes that are rising now. I can't help but believe that if he was offered the presidential nomination, he would take it. However, a lot of folks say maybe it's too soon. He wants to wait because he's basically a moderate conservative, a pragmatic conservative. And that's what makes him very attractive right now. People try to find an alternative for the more ideological folks.
Yeah, I mean, the best way for him to be a draft candidate on the third, fourth, or fifth ballot is to have behaved beforehand like he wasn't ever going to want to run.
That he's doing it for the country, he's doing it for the party. Somebody's got to get the nomination. If there's really a deadlock, then it's going to be opened up. And he may say, I hate to do this, you made me.
I actually think Paul Ryan means what he says. I don't think this is some calculated strategy on his part. And I think he's playing a longer game, which is whoever they nominate for president, he's going to be an alternative voice for what it is the Republican Party stands for. That is not a bad position to be in. And remember, he's also a young guy who could run in 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, when the situation may be a little less turbulent in the Republican Party.
Right. I trust the House Speaker here, too. What I don't trust is that an unruly, angry, disruptive, desperate for change, a group of convention delegates would do anything conventional.
I think that's right. I mean, his motives may be pure right now, but it may be on the 9th ballot where people are looking around and he's the only.
And if not him, maybe somebody else who's not even in the mix right now.
Remember what Mo Udall said in 1976? He said, if nominated, I'll move to Mexico. If elected, I will fight extradition.
All right. Best quotes ever in the business, Mo Udall.
Let's move now to the Democrats here. Ron, what's your sense of, does David Axelrod describe a situation in which Bernie Sanders has to, basically lightning has to strike for him? His supporters think that suggests the system is rigged. What's your feeling about where things really stand?
Well, they're both right. David Axelrod is right that we have to have a fundamental change in the race, whether it's something involving Secretary Clinton or lightning strikes with Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders people are right that the system is rigged. Now, this is the system he decided to run in. He wanted to run a Democratic primary, which is rigged towards the establishment. Again, in the 70s, the Democratic Party became more democratic in that primaries have a lot more power than they did before the 70s, but they didn't want to give up all the party to the people, or all the power to the people. So you still have these party establishments who get to vote for whoever they want, no matter how the voters vote in their districts or in their states. And they're going to hold sway.
Amy, David Axelrod played down any sense of contention between the two candidates. A lot of other people this week spent a lot of time talking about how tough the battle and push and pull was between the two of them. Bernie Sanders certainly seems a little irritated in my conversation with him. What's your sense of where the Democratic race is now and how much lasting damage could be created between now and the convention?
Well, a lot. But in terms of the superdelegates, it cuts both ways. There are so many superdelegates that it's basically very possible that Bernie Sanders can prevent Hillary Clinton from getting an absolute majority, the magic number, without any superdelegates, at which point he's said that, his campaign has said that they'll just treat that as a big primary that hasn't happened yet, a 700 delegate primary that's going to happen at the convention, and really push it to then. So a lot is going to depend on how the Clinton campaign responds to his ideas about a party platform, about their direction and how they go after him. And if it's in a way that reinforces questions that the Sanders supporters have about her forthrightness, it could be quite damaging for her.
Susan, one of the things that was brought up in the debate was the 1994 crime bill. Both Bernie Sanders voted for it and Hillary Clinton supported it as a part of her husband's administration. Why are we talking about the 1994 crime bill?
Because politics had the position of the Democratic Party, the ideological position has really shifted to the left, and also because it's a different time. Crime is much less of an issue now than it was in 1994. A lot of people lined up behind the 1994 crime bill, but look at what Hillary Clinton herself has described as the unintended consequences, which was the incarceration of so many African Americans, especially African American men. Attitudes toward that have changed, just as attitudes have changed in a significant way since the Bill Clinton administration on things like the Defense of Marriage Act. You know, there were a series of things that a moderate, centrist Democratic president did in the 1990s that don't look, that now are controversial in new ways when you look at the party in 2016.
Clarence, one of the things that Bernie Sanders said is he had criticized Bill Clinton for defending his wife, for using the term super predator in the context of this debate in the 1990s. So he said basically it was a racist term and everybody at the time knew it was a racist term. Is that right?
No, everybody at the time, quite the opposite. Super predator was a term that John Dickerson, the sociologist at the University of Pennsylvania, came up with, who by 1999 was regretting it because he looked at the numbers again and found that a new generation of super predator teenagers was not being created after all. In fact, crime went down among juveniles and adults after the early 90s. But meanwhile, though, even most of the Congressional Black Caucus, but about 2 votes, as I recall, supported the crime bill and felt that something needed to be done. The problem was, D'Ulio wanted a broad-based group of reforms to try to prevent crime, turn young people away from crime. The Republican Congress at that time was more interested in punitive actions, and that's why the whole mass incarceration trend increased. Nowadays, Susan's right. You've got a cross-party coalition now of folks, even Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, who want to see the high cost of incarceration and the ineffectiveness of it reversed. So it's a different world now.
As a policy matter, there are now tens of thousands of African Americans who are in jail right now under sentences that have been rolled back by Congress because of the crack, the cocaine disparity. But they're still in jail because they weren't grandfathered. And with a stroke of the pen, President Obama can free them. And for some reason hasn't. I mean, there's just been a few, 30 or 40, but there's thousands of African Americans who are in jail under this old crime bill that now the Democratic Party is abhorrent to, but the Democratic liberal president, for some reason, hasn't used his executive clemency powers. I can't figure it out.
Go ahead.
Another way that those debates in that whole super predator era has come up and might come up more is with actually Donald Trump, who one of his early forays into politics was in the case of the Central Park Five.
That's right.
These were 14, 15, and 16-year-olds who were labeled super predators in that way, and whose execution he called for in an ad in the Daily News. He later, when they were exonerated, when they were shown to be innocent in the last year or two, has not regretted that at all. Has said that they were pulling a scam on the city.
I want to just quickly, before we leave here, mention, Ron, your new book, Love That Boy. Tell us quickly about where the title comes from. There's a political tune to it, and we're going to talk about this later on the web. But
thank you. When my son was 5, he had a quirky, awkward encounter with President Bush. My son was quirky and awkward because he has Asperger's syndrome, a wonderful quirky condition. And President Bush, on the way out, grabbed me by the hand and said, "Love that boy." And at the time, as a father struggling with this, I thought he meant, well, that's kind of quaint, to love my boy despite his idiosyncrasies. Over the course of doing this book 10 years later, talking with other parents, a lot of child development experts, I realized I need to love my son because of what makes him different, and not despite of.
And very quickly, and you then go on tours with him to historical places.
Including he visited with President Clinton and President Bush, and they both could not have been more gracious. It's a good reminder of how decent these men and women that we cover, that we often, people like me, get cynical about. It was a very gracious thing they both did.
All right, Ron, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks all of you so much for being with us.